I sat quietly in the dimly lit living room, lost in thought. Suddenly, Mateo walked in, a smug look plastered across his face. Without a word, he tossed a set of papers onto the table, the sound startling me out of my thoughts. "I'm divorcing you," he said coldly, his voice devoid of any warmth or remorse. My heart sank as I glanced at the divorce papers, realizing what they meant. Standing beside him, Charlotte, his lover, gave me a triumphant smile, as though she had finally won some sort of twisted competition. Mateo's gaze turned hard as he spoke again. "Take your useless child and leave. There's nothing left for you here." My mind reeled at his words, but I tried to remain calm, reminding myself of the strength within me. My heart was pounding, but I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing my pain. Charlotte, her smug smile never faltering, snuggled closer to Mateo, looking down at me as though I was nothing more than an inconvenience in their lives. Yet, as I looked at them, a strange sense of pity washed over me. They thought they were so clever, so superior, but they had no idea just how foolish they appeared in my eyes. Their cruelty only showed me how empty they truly were. Suddenly, my mother, who had been quietly observing the scene, stepped forward. Her voice was calm yet powerful as she spoke. "Do you even understand what you're doing? Do you think you can just discard my daughter like she's nothing?" Mateo's arrogant expression faltered slightly, caught off guard by my mother's presence and unwavering stance. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. I felt a swell of gratitude for my mother's strength. Despite the humiliation of the moment, having her there gave me a renewed sense of hope. I could see that, while Mateo and Charlotte thought they held all the power, they were sorely mistaken. My mother's mere presence challenged their assumed authority, and I began to feel a spark of defiance growing within me. My name is Ava Jones, and I am 32 years old. I have been married to Mateo for 3 long years, living under the same roof as his parents. When I first joined their household, I believed it was the beginning of a joyful new chapter. I had been hopeful about our future together and was eager to build a loving family. Recently, I had even more reason to be hopeful. After years of infertility struggles and countless treatments, I was finally pregnant. The joy I felt upon learning I would soon become a mother was overwhelming, filling me with a sense of purpose. But that joy was short-lived. The moment Mateo learned we were having a daughter, his attitude changed completely. He had always wanted a son, and the disappointment on his face when I told him the baby's gender was unmistakable. I had naively thought he would come around, that his love for our child would overcome any petty expectations he held. But I was wrong. The warmth I once saw in him turned to ice, and his parents were no different. The coldness from Mateo and his family grew with each passing day. Once, they had been so kind, so welcoming, but now their words were laced with bitterness and disdain. My mother-in-law, who once fussed over me and encouraged me to take care of myself during the pregnancy, began to criticize everything I did. "Why don't you work faster, Ava?" she would snap, watching me struggle through household chores with my growing belly. Mateo only added to my suffering, his own words filled with resentment. "Are you really going to make us eat this?" he sneered one evening, pushing his plate away in disgust. My heart ached with every insult, but I held back my tears, telling myself I needed to endure this for the sake of my unborn child. I knew my daughter deserved a family, a home filled with love, and I would endure whatever I had to for her. But each day, the hostility grew, leaving me feeling more isolated and defeated than ever before. I finally reached a breaking point one evening when my mother-in-law said something so cruel it shook me to my core. "Why don't you just get an abortion?" she said casually, as though it was the most natural suggestion in the world. Her words echoed in my mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. I couldn't believe she would say something so heartless about her own grandchild. I looked to Mateo, hoping he would stand up for our child, but he only shrugged, smirking as though he found the idea amusing. I felt my resolve beginning to crumble under the weight of their disdain. I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. If I did, I would be putting both my child and myself in harm's way. I needed to get out, to find a place where I could feel safe and loved. That night, I called my mother, the only person I knew I could trust. Her voice was filled with concern when she heard my trembling words. "Ava, come home," she said softly, her words a lifeline in the darkness that had become my life. 2 days later, I packed a small suitcase and left Mateo's house, taking my unborn child and whatever courage I had left. When I arrived at my mother's home, I felt a sense of relief wash over me, a weight lifting from my shoulders that I hadn't realized I was carrying. My mother welcomed me with open arms, her warmth a stark contrast to the cold indifference I had endured for so long. The familiar surroundings of my childhood home brought me a sense of comfort I hadn't felt in months. For the first time since my pregnancy began, I felt truly safe. Each day, my mother cared for me, cooking warm meals and ensuring I had everything I needed. I began to feel hopeful again, imagining a future filled with happiness and peace. But despite the safety of my new surroundings, a nagging worry lingered at the back of my mind. Mateo hadn't reached out once since I left. Not a single message, not a single call. I wondered if he even cared about the child he had once been so eager to have. As the days turned into weeks, I tried to push thoughts of Mateo and his family from my mind. I wanted to focus on my pregnancy, on the little life growing inside me. But it was hard to ignore the silence. My mother noticed it too. "Why hasn't Mateo called?" she asked one day, her brow creased with worry. I didn't know how to answer. How could I explain that the man I had married, the father of my child, seemed to have abandoned us completely? I could see the sadness in her eyes, and I knew she felt as hurt as I did. But she never pushed me to talk about it. Instead, she focused on making me feel safe and loved, her support a constant reminder that I wasn't alone. As my due date approached, I found myself both excited and terrified. I knew I was about to meet my daughter, the little miracle who had given me the strength to keep going. But I also knew that no matter how joyful the moment, there would be an emptiness, a void where Mateo's support should have been. The day of my daughter's birth finally arrived, and the pain of labor was intense, unlike anything I had ever experienced. My mother held my hand the entire time, guiding me through each contraction with calm reassurance. "You're strong, Ava," she whispered, her words a balm to my frayed nerves. "You can do this." Hours passed in a blur, and just when I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, my daughter was born. She was perfect, with a tiny cry that filled the room with life. Tears filled my eyes as I held her for the first time, her soft skin and tiny fingers, a testament to the love and hope that had sustained me through months of pain and uncertainty. My mother was beside me, tears of joy streaming down her face. In that moment, surrounded by love, I felt complete. But as the initial euphoria faded, a familiar sadness crept in. Mateo wasn't there. He hadn't called, hadn't even asked about the birth of his own child. I wondered if he would ever know the joy of holding her, or if he had already cast us aside completely. Life after my daughter's birth was a whirlwind of sleepless nights and endless feedings. But my mother was there every step of the way, her experience and patience a guiding light in the often overwhelming world of motherhood. She would take over night feedings, allowing me to get some much-needed rest, and I was endlessly grateful for her support. I couldn't imagine going through this without her. Each day, my daughter grew stronger, her little smiles and giggles a source of pure joy. Despite the challenges, I found myself falling into a rhythm, each day blending into the next as I adjusted to life as a mother. But the absence of Mateo remained a thorn in my side. I continued to send him photos and videos, hoping he would respond, that he would want to be part of our daughter's life. But there was nothing. Not a single message, not a single call. As the weeks turned into months, my hope began to fade. I realized that no matter how much I wanted him to care, Mateo had made his choice. Eventually, I decided I couldn't live in limbo any longer. I needed answers, for myself and for my daughter. I told my mother I was going back to Mateo's house, determined to confront him and find out once and for all where we stood. She agreed to come with me, sensing the weight of the decision and the strength it would require. Together, we traveled back to the place that had once been my home, but now felt like a prison. As we walked up to the door, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever lay ahead. When I opened the door, I was greeted by the sound of laughter, children's laughter, and a woman's voice that was unmistakably Charlotte's. My heart dropped as I realized they hadn't missed me at all. Instead, they had filled my absence with someone else. In the living room, Charlotte sat with a young boy, both of them laughing as Mateo looked on with a smile. When Mateo saw me standing in the doorway, his smile faded, replaced by an expression of annoyance. "What are you doing here, Ava?" he sneered, as if I was an intruder in my own life. I glanced at the boy, realizing with a sinking heart that he was Mateo's child with Charlotte. All this time, he had been building a life with her, leaving me and our daughter behind. "So this is your new family?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of sadness and anger. Mateo shrugged, wrapping his arm around Charlotte. "Yes, Ava, this is my real family. You're just a mistake I've been meaning to correct." His words hit me like a physical blow, but I forced myself to stay calm. I looked at my mother, her face etched with sorrow, yet she stood strong beside me, her presence a reminder that I wasn't alone. As much as it hurt, I knew I needed to walk away from this toxic life, for my own sake and for my daughter's future. As I turned to leave, my mother spoke up, her voice firm and unwavering. "Mateo, do you realize who Ava's family is?" she asked, her question sharp and calculated. Mateo looked taken aback, clearly puzzled. "Ava's uncle owns the company you work for," she continued, watching as his face registered shock. "Every promotion you've received, every raise, has been because of Ava's family." Mateo's smug expression disappeared, replaced by panic. My mother pressed on, her words cutting through his arrogance. "If you abandon Ava, you lose everything: the job, the money, even the support of your so-called family." Mateo's confidence crumbled as he processed the reality of his situation. He stammered, reaching out toward me, but I stepped back. "It's too late," I said, my voice filled with the strength I had rediscovered. With my daughter in my arms and my mother by my side, I walked away from Mateo, leaving behind the pain, the betrayal, and the life I had once thought was mine. For the first time, I felt free, ready to build a future filled with love, joy, and the promise of a new beginning.